but I can't comprehend this. I think that Richard Spencer's peaceful form of a coup is absurd and silly.
Never have I ever promoted hatred or violence or anything like that.
We do not want, groups clashing at the farmers market or violence or anything like that.
Despite the fact that we don't advocate violence, we continue to, say that that's not the right way.
I want to make it very clear that I do not condone any form of violence or terrorism.
I do not belong to any terrorist organisation. I am not on the streets inciting any violence.
I have always opposed violence and illegality of any kind. My record couldn't be clearer.
I condemn any acts of political violence. I say that time and time again.
We reject violence, we reject this breaking the law, but we also reject the idea that anything positive could come for us or to us by way of any sort of violence. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
First and foremost, I've never encouraged hate or hatred. No, third point, and probably most important point, that is, I don't endorse political violence. I don't endorse or condone of any sort of political violence at all.
I'm on record not only as opposing political violence.
We have to take measures to protect ourselves, and once again, not advocating for violence here.
Acts of violence do not define what it means to stand for your nation, and we must not tolerate any suggestion that our beliefs are in some way to blame for the actions of individuals.
It was all legal, everything they did. They weren't out there to commit any kind of violence, to incite any kind of violence in any way.
They will win over more sympathisers. The government is going to throw money at them. They are going to gain, which is why you cannot resort to violence, and specifically not terrorism, obviously. It must be discouraged. I have to discourage it. And that's what I'm doing right now.
I don't agree with violence, and I don't think that should use violence.
To me, there's a clear moral principle that violence is not an appropriate reaction to words or ideas unless you're being directly and imminently threatened.
Is it recording? Yeah. All right. Why don't we murder more white people? Take one.
I think we don't murder more white people because it's very dangerous to do so.
If you see a Nazi, punch a Nazi.
Brutal and violent or whatever, we need this because politicians in the US are not getting it through their freaking heads. They say, look, these protests get violent, people get hurt. Obviously. I understand that, but that's what democracy is all about.
You get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Of certain individuals and institutions, we will, as per Chief Jim Hopper, punch some people in the face.
There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
You genuinely do hate conservatives, don't you?
Very much so. I've moved full on to the political violence level, or the real violence level when it comes to conservative people. Yeah, I think they need to be excised from my fucking country.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
What we've got to do is fight in Congress, fight in the courts, fight in the streets.
Fight in the streets.
My 90-year-old uncle, if he was alive, would have punched that son of a bitch in the face, and I would have had his back.
I think it's hard for there to be very big change without some sort of violent aspect to it.
Property damage is absolutely justifiable.
Then I realized there's no better way to show some speech is not equal. Some speech requires a more visceral response. It's like Overton's window. That's the term from which ideas are tolerated in public discourse. Well, Overton's window doesn't mean shit unless it comes with some enforcement. So yeah, this is enforcement.
And remember, watch from the shadows and see the truth.